There is a quiet danger in seeing what others do not see, a burden that rests on the shoulders of those who notice truths hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, understood this better than most. His life was marked by visions, dreams, and insights that many around him dismissed as strange, even dangerous. Yet he carried them anyway, because he believed that turning away from these inner truths was far more dangerous than facing them. Break was Sigmund Freud, his teacher and once close friend, was not only professional but existential. Freud wanted to reduce the psyche to simple explanations of repression and sexuality, but Jung could not ignore the deeper symbols that emerged in his patients' dreams, or the ancient myths that echoed in their struggles. He saw too much, more than Freud or the medical establishment could tolerate. And so, he walked alone. This loneliness is something many people who see differently come to know. It is not only philosophers or psychologists. It may be an artist who paints visions that disturb the viewer, or a writer whose words challenge the world too much, or even an ordinary person who notices hypocrisy where others only see order. To see what others don't is not a gift that guarantees joy. Often, it is a wound. And yet, it can also be a source of profound meaning, because through that wound, life itself begins to reveal its deeper patterns. Jung gave a name to these patterns: archetypes. He believed they were the universal symbols and stories buried in the human mind, shared across cultures and history. The hero, the shadow, the mother, the trickster, these figures are not simply myths from the past. They live within us, shaping the way we experience the world. To recognize these patterns is to begin seeing what others may miss, the invisible architecture of the soul. But once again, such vision carries a risk. To admit that you see archetypes moving through life is to risk being misunderstood, to risk being dismissed as too mystical or too strange. And yet Jung pressed forward. He believed that ignoring what we see within ourselves is more dangerous than facing it. The shadows we refuse to look at grow larger. They slip into our actions, into our politics, into our relationships. They become destructive forces, unleashed without our awareness. The danger of seeing what others don't is real, but the danger of refusing to see at all is far greater. Imagine carrying a truth that burns in your chest, while everyone around you pretends it does not exist. Imagine trying to speak of it, only to be met with silence or rejection. This is the weight Jung carried, and it is the weight that anyone who sees deeply must bear. It is not only an intellectual challenge, it is an emotional one. Loneliness, doubt, and fear become constant companions. And yet Jung believed that this is the path toward wholeness. To see what others don't is not about superiority. It is about responsibility. It is about carrying the vision long enough for others to begin to recognize its truth. This is why Jung's writings remain so alive today. He teaches us that the act of seeing is dangerous, but also necessary. Our age is filled with distractions designed to keep us from looking inward: constant noise, endless entertainment, shallow comforts. But when someone dares to pause, to reflect, to listen to the dream that unsettles them or the thought that will not go away, they are already stepping into Jung's territory. They are already beginning to see what others cannot, and already beginning to feel the danger of that vision. And here is where we find a paradox. The very act that isolates us is also the act that can heal us. Jung believed that the only way to become whole is to integrate what is hidden, to take the rejected parts of ourselves and bring them into the light. It is not easy, because the world around us may resist it, but it is the only way to live truthfully. To see what others don't may mean losing the comfort of belonging, but it also opens the possibility of becoming real, becoming whole, becoming free. The story of Jung reminds us that vision comes with a cost. And yet, without those who dare to see differently, society would remain stagnant. The prophets, the poets, the philosophers, the dreamers, they have always been treated as dangerous. But their danger is also their gift. They remind us that there is more to life than the safe, flat world of appearances. Beneath the surface lies a deeper reality, and it is waiting for those who are brave enough to look. As we walk with Jung's thought, we begin to understand that the danger of seeing what others don't is not a curse to be avoided, but a calling to be embraced. It requires courage, patience, and humility. And above all, it requires a willingness to live with uncertainty. Because to see what others don't is not about having all the answers. It is about being awake to the mystery of life itself. To step further into Jung's world is to step into the wilderness of the soul. He believed that within every human being lies a landscape far larger than the one we see outside. Mountains of desire, rivers of memory, forests of fear, and vast open skies of possibility, all hidden beneath the surface of consciousness. Most people never wander far into this inner world. They stay in the safe paths, the well-lit streets of daily routine. But Jung insisted that if we want to live fully, we must venture into the unknown regions. We must see what others refuse to see. This journey inward is not a peaceful walk. It is a confrontation. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. And the first step is meeting the shadow. The shadow is everything we deny in ourselves, everything we reject because it does not fit the image we present to the world. It is the anger we pretend we do not feel, the envy we hide behind politeness, the selfishness we mask with good intentions. The shadow is all of this, and more. To see it is painful. To admit it is terrifying. But Jung warned that if we do not face our shadow, it will control us from the dark. This is one of the deepest dangers of seeing what others don't. If you begin to notice the shadow in yourself, you may also begin to notice it in society. You may see how nations project their fears onto enemies, how groups scapegoat outsiders, how politics is often a battle of shadows pretending to be virtues. To recognize this is to risk disillusionment. You can no longer look at the world with naive eyes. The comforting illusions collapse, and in their place, a more difficult truth appears. But there is also liberation in this. Jung believed that when we see the shadow clearly, we begin to reclaim our power. What we thought was an enemy becomes part of us. The rejected child is welcomed back into the home of the self. And with each piece of the shadow we accept, we grow stronger, deeper, more human. The danger lies in denial. If we refuse to see, the shadow grows monstrous. Wars, corruption, violence, these are not only political realities but psychological ones. They are the collective shadow made flesh. To see what others don't is to stand at the edge of this truth. It can feel overwhelming. Many turn away. But Jung encouraged us to keep looking, because behind the darkness lies something extraordinary, the self. Not the small ego that craves recognition, but the deeper self that unites all opposites. He believed that the self is like a guiding center, a spark of wholeness that draws us toward integration. Dreams, symbols, and synchronicities are the language of this self. They whisper to us, nudging us toward growth, even when we resist. But to notice them, we must be willing to see beyond ordinary appearances. Jung himself experienced this most intensely during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. After his break with Freud, he entered a period of profound inner turmoil. He felt as though he was descending into madness. Night after night, he recorded his visions, speaking with figures that arose from the depths of his psyche. These encounters filled him with fear, but also with wonder. From this descent came the foundation of his greatest insights. It was in the chaos of his own inner world that Jung discovered the living reality of the unconscious. And it was here that he realized the truth: to see what others don't is to risk destruction, but also transformation. He would later preserve these visions in what is now known as the Red Book, a massive illuminated manuscript of his inner journey. For decades he kept it hidden, fearing that its strange imagery would be misunderstood. Only late in the 20th century did the world finally see it. Reading it today, one cannot help but feel both awe and unease. It is a testament to the danger and necessity of vision. Without it, Jung could never have developed his theories. Without it, he would not have become who he was. But carrying it nearly broke him. This reveals something essential. Seeing what others don't is not simply about intelligence or creativity. It is about endurance. Can you carry the weight of what you see without being crushed by it? Can you endure the loneliness, the doubt, the fear of rejection? Jung survived only because he found a way to transform his visions into meaning. He gave form to his chaos through symbols, theories, and teachings. He turned his descent into a path for others. This is the great work of anyone who sees differently. It is not enough to see. One must also translate the vision into something that can nourish others. But even here lies danger. Jung warned that those who identify too strongly with their vision may fall into inflation. They may begin to believe they are prophets or saviors, chosen above others. This is another trap of seeing what others don't. The ego loves to claim ownership of insight. Yet the deeper truth is humbling. Vision is not ours to possess. It passes through us, like a dream, like a song carried on the wind. The moment we cling to it as proof of our superiority, we lose its essence. Jung believed that true vision always points beyond the ego, towards something larger, something that connects us to the mystery of existence itself. And so we see the paradox once again. To see what others don't can isolate us, but it can also connect us. It tears us away from the comfort of the crowd, but it can also reveal the threads that link us to all of humanity. Jung spoke often of the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of symbols and archetypes that lives within every person. This means that the visions of one individual are never only personal. They echo the experiences of countless others, across cultures and centuries. The danger of seeing is real, but so is the possibility of communion. What isolates us may also unite us, if we learn to speak the language of the soul. When Jung turned his vision outward from the individual psyche to the life of nations, he saw something unsettling. He realized that what is true within one human being is also true within entire societies. Just as the individual has a shadow, so does a culture. Just as one person can repress desires and fears until they erupt, so can a nation. And Jung warned that the collective shadow is often far more dangerous than the personal one, because when masses of people share the same blindness, the consequences can reshape history. He lived through 2 world wars, and he saw firsthand how collective blindness can become catastrophe. Jung wrote that what is repressed in the psyche does not disappear, it gathers strength in the dark. For individuals, this might mean sudden outbursts of anger, destructive addictions, or breakdowns. For societies, it can mean violence, scapegoating, or war. He saw Nazi Germany as a horrifying example of the collective shadow taking form. A whole culture, wounded by humiliation and economic collapse, projected its inner darkness onto others, creating enemies to destroy. Millions followed, swept up in a tide of hatred. For Jung, this was not only a political event but a psychological eruption, the shadow of an entire people unleashed. To see what others don't in times like these is an unbearable weight. Those who noticed the madness rising often went unheard. Some were silenced, others ignored. The majority preferred the comfort of illusions. This is another danger of vision. If you see too clearly into the sickness of your own society, you may be rejected not only as eccentric but as a traitor. Jung himself faced criticism for speaking too openly about the dangers he saw. But he refused to stop, because he believed that to ignore the collective unconscious was to invite destruction. And yet Jung's insight was not only about warning. He also believed that within the collective shadow lies the possibility of renewal. Just as the individual grows by integrating the rejected parts of the self, a society can also grow by facing its own darkness. Myths, rituals, and stories have always served this purpose. They allow a culture to give shape to its fears and desires, to bring them into the light rather than letting them fester in silence. Jung argued that when societies lose their myths, they risk losing their balance. Without shared symbols to contain the shadow, it breaks loose in uncontrolled ways. This insight feels urgent even today. We live in an age that prides itself on rationality, on data and technology, on the promise that science alone can solve our problems. But Jung reminded us that beneath the surface of progress, the ancient forces of the psyche remain alive. They do not vanish because we stop believing in them. They simply find new forms. The shadow of a modern nation may not look like the shadow of an ancient tribe, but its essence is the same. It erupts in nationalism, in fanaticism, in the worship of power, in the hunger for enemies. And those who dare to see this pattern may feel like outsiders in their own world, carrying a vision that others would rather not confront. The danger of seeing what others don't is magnified at the collective level. To speak truth about a culture's shadow is to threaten its sense of identity. Most people would rather remain blind than face the discomfort of seeing their own complicity in injustice, their own unconscious drives behind prejudice, greed, or violence. This is why prophets, poets, and visionaries are often rejected in their own time. They see what the culture refuses to acknowledge, and in doing so they appear dangerous. But Jung insisted that this rejection does not erase the truth. The shadow waits, patient, until the day it breaks through. Yet here lies another paradox. The very vision that isolates us can also be the seed of transformation. When even a few individuals see clearly, they can carry the possibility of renewal. Jung often turned to the image of the alchemist, who worked patiently to transform base matter into gold. He believed that society, like the individual, must undergo a kind of alchemy. By facing its shadow, by integrating what has been rejected, it can give birth to something new. This is not a quick process. It is long, painful, and uncertain. But it is the only way to avoid destruction. Jung saw the 20th century as a time of enormous danger, not only because of war, but because of the spiritual emptiness of modern life. He feared that without a living connection to myth and meaning, societies would collapse into chaos. He did not believe that religion should return in its old dogmatic forms, but he did believe that humanity could not live on rationality alone. We need symbols, stories, and images that touch the soul. Without them, the shadow grows restless. Without them, the collective unconscious takes over in unconscious, destructive ways. To see what others don't, in this context, is to recognize that our personal struggles are never just personal. When you wrestle with your own shadow, you are also wrestling with forces that shape the entire world. When you ignore your inner truth, you contribute to the blindness of your culture. And when you dare to face what others won't, you carry not only your own burden, but also the possibility of healing something larger. Jung believed that the fate of the world may depend on whether enough individuals are willing to look inward, to confront their darkness, and to bring something new into being. For Jung, the question was never simply whether we can see what others don't, but what we do with what we see. Vision by itself is only the beginning. If it remains locked inside the mind, it becomes a burden. If it is shared recklessly, it risks rejection or distortion. The true task is to translate the inner vision into something that can nourish life. And this, Jung believed, is where myth becomes essential. Myth, in Jung's understanding, is not a collection of old stories to be dismissed as superstition. It is the language of the soul. Myths are symbolic maps that help us orient ourselves in a universe that would otherwise feel chaotic. They carry the wisdom of generations, condensed into images that bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the unconscious. When Jung studied the dreams of his patients, he saw the same patterns emerge again and again, images of death and rebirth, of journeys through darkness, of battles with monsters, of wise guides offering help. These were not personal inventions. They were echoes of the archetypes, ancient forms arising from the depths of the collective unconscious. Jung believed that without myths, human beings lose their way. Rational explanations can describe the surface of life, but they cannot satisfy the hunger of the soul. Science can tell us how the stars burn, but it cannot tell us why we feel awe when we look at them. Technology can connect us across the world, but it cannot replace the need for meaning. Myths provide that meaning. They give shape to our inner world and help us carry the weight of what we see. Without them, vision becomes unbearable. This is why Jung warned that modern societies are in danger. We live in a world that often treats myth as irrelevant, religion as outdated, and symbolism as childish. But the psyche does not obey the commands of culture. The unconscious continues to speak, whether we listen or not. And when we silence its voice, it erupts in distorted ways. We see myths return in fanatic ideologies, in conspiracy theories, in cults of celebrity and power. The need for story does not vanish. It simply takes new and often destructive forms when denied. To see this, as Jung did, is to recognize that our survival depends on finding living myths that can guide us without enslaving us. For the individual, This means listening carefully to the symbols that arise in dreams, in art, in moments of deep emotion. Jung believed that these personal myths are not random, they are the threads that connect us to the larger story of humanity. To notice them is to begin weaving our own lives into the tapestry of meaning. But again, there is danger here. Not every vision should be followed blindly. Not every symbol is a revelation. The line between madness and insight is thin. Jung emphasized that discernment is essential. Vision must be tested, shaped, and grounded in life. Otherwise, it becomes obsession, or worse, delusion. This is why he valued the process of active imagination. In this practice, one enters into dialogue with the figures that appear in dreams or visions, treating them as living presences rather than dismissing them as mere illusions. By conversing with these inner figures, by listening and questioning, one learns to integrate them rather than being overwhelmed. It is not about surrendering to fantasy, but about allowing the unconscious to speak in its own language, and then translating that speech into conscious understanding. This is the bridge between inner and outer worlds. This is how vision becomes meaning. To see what others don't, then, is not a matter of escape from the world, it is a deeper entry into it. The artist who paints a vision gives others a way to glimpse the invisible. The poet who shapes words around an insight allows others to feel it in their own hearts. The philosopher who names a truth opens the path for others to walk. In each case, the individual becomes a vessel for something larger than themselves. They carry the vision, not as a possession, but as a responsibility. Jung himself embodied this. He never claimed to own the truths he uncovered. He always spoke of them as discoveries made through dialogue with the unconscious. He insisted that the unconscious is not merely personal but collective, that each insight belongs not to the ego but to the human spirit as a whole. This humility is part of what allowed his vision to endure. He knew the danger of inflation, of mistaking oneself for the source of revelation. He knew that the role of the visionary is not to dominate but to serve. And yet, he also knew how heavy this service can be. To live as a bridge between the inner and outer worlds is to live in tension. You are never fully at home in the ordinary world, because part of you always sees beyond it. But you are also never fully at home in the inner world, because part of you must return to translate it into language others can grasp. This is a restless existence, a life lived between realms. Jung carried this tension all his life, and he knew that those who see what others don't will feel it too. It is the price of vision, and the gift of it. But there is hope in this tension. Jung believed that when an individual finds the courage to live between worlds, they create a path for others. They show that meaning is possible, that the unconscious is not an enemy but an ally, that myth is not a relic but a living force. They remind us that the task of life is not to escape into illusion nor to collapse into despair, but to weave together the fragments of our experience into a story that holds. In this weaving, the personal and the collective meet. The self becomes whole. And the world, even in its darkness, begins to shine with a deeper light. In his final years, Jung's vision turned toward the mystery that waits at the edge of every life, death. For him, death was not an ending but a passage, a threshold into the unknown. He saw it not as a void, but as a profound transformation, much like the many transformations the psyche undergoes in life. To Jung, the soul was too vast, too deeply rooted in the collective unconscious, to be extinguished by the body's end. And yet, he did not claim certainty. He did not declare doctrine. He spoke of possibilities, of images, of symbols that point beyond the veil. To see what others don't often means seeing death differently. Where some see only finality, Jung saw a continuation of the same patterns he had studied all his life. Dreams of journeys, of crossings, of encounters with ancestors or luminous figures, to him, these were not random illusions. They were whispers of the archetypal truth that death, like birth, is part of a larger rhythm. And though he admitted he could not prove what lay beyond, he believed that to live as if the soul has meaning beyond death is to live more fully, more courageously, more honestly. Here lies the ultimate danger of vision. If you see life as more than mere survival, you will never again be able to live shallowly. If you sense that every moment carries weight beyond the visible, you cannot simply drift along with the crowd. You are called to live consciously, to face suffering with dignity, to meet joy with gratitude, and to approach death not with denial but with a quiet readiness. Such a vision isolates you, but it also gives you strength. Jung often reflected on the symbol of the mandala, the sacred circle that appears across cultures as a representation of wholeness. He saw it again and again in his own dreams, and in the dreams of his patients. To him, the mandala was not only an image of the psyche becoming whole, but also of the cosmos itself, a reminder that we are part of a larger order, even when we feel lost. To see this is to glimpse what others may not, that behind the chaos of life, there is pattern. Behind the suffering, there is transformation. Behind death, perhaps, there is continuation. But he never allowed vision to become arrogance. He knew too well the dangers of certainty. He spoke instead of humility before the mystery. The unconscious, he said, is not ours to control. It is older than us, deeper than us, and ultimately unknowable. To see what others don't is not to conquer truth, but to be touched by it. It is not to possess wisdom, but to be guided by it. And this humility, perhaps, is what gives his thought its enduring power. When Jung died in 1961, he left behind not only a body of writings but a living invitation. An invitation to look inward, to face the shadow, to listen to dreams, to seek meaning in myth, to hold the tension of opposites, and to approach the mystery of existence with both courage and reverence. His life reminds us that vision is not for the faint of heart. It demands sacrifice. It brings loneliness. It exposes you to misunderstanding and even ridicule. But it also brings depth, freedom, and a sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. And so, we return to the beginning, the danger of seeing what others don't. It is real, and it should never be dismissed. But perhaps the greater danger is blindness, to live without ever questioning, without ever listening, without ever daring to see. Jung's life stands as proof that vision, though dangerous, is also necessary. For without those who see differently, we remain trapped in the surface of things, repeating the same mistakes, asleep to our own depths. To see what others don't is to walk a lonely path. But it is also to walk the path that leads to wholeness. It is to descend into shadow and return with light. It is to carry vision not as a possession but as a gift, offered humbly to the world. It is to stand at the edge of mystery, aware of your own smallness, and yet still willing to look, still willing to see, still willing to live. And perhaps, in the end, this is Jung's greatest legacy. Not that he saw more than others, but that he showed us how to bear the weight of vision, how to live with it, how to grow from it, and how to let it guide us toward the deepest truth of all.